Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and I apologize profusely for the late start. We should have started at 3 o'clock, but it's now 3:18. I was experiencing some technical difficulties. Now, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are asking a question that's generating a lot of debate. Has the Trump administration changed its approach to Maria Corina Machado? And she was the opposition leader in Venezuela. She belongs to the opposition party in Venezuela. But we know that when Maduro was dethroned, when the United States went to Venezuela and took out the president, kidnapped him, that they installed Delcy Rodriguez. Now, we know that Maria Corina Machado, has been fighting tooth and nail to get the presidency because, that was the deal. It seems like she and Trump had struck up in that she would have supported the opposition and they would have supported Trump in getting Maduro out of office. So she was expecting that having now had Maduro out of office, that she would now be able to get that position as opposition leader in Venezuela. However, it seems like Trump has betrayed her or is betraying her, and she's finding herself now being booted, as it were, out of Venezuela. So, and if so, what does that tell us about U.S. foreign policy going forward? Now, we look at the facts, separate confirmed reporting from speculation, and discuss what this could mean for Venezuela and America's allies around the world. So this afternoon, we are tackling a question that's raising eyebrows in Washington, Caracas, and beyond. Has the Trump administration turned its back on Maria Corina Machado? For years, Machado has been the face of Venezuela's democratic opposition. She has inspired millions of Venezuelans to want to see an end to Nicolas Maduro's reign and a return to democratic government. That is what she said. At the same time, President Trump has long presented himself as a strong opponent of authoritarian regimes in the Western Hemisphere. So why are some analysts and political observers now asking whether U.S. policy toward Venezuela is changing? Has Washington shifted from supporting democratic movements to pursuing stability and strategic interests? Or are recent events being misunderstood? That's exactly what we're going to examine today. We'll separate confirmed facts from speculation, look at the latest reporting, and ask whether this represents a temporary tactical adjustment or a broader shift in American foreign policy. We'll also discuss what this could mean not only for Venezuela, but for America's relationships with democratic partners around the world. As always, I encourage respectful debate. Whether you agree or disagree, I want to hear your thoughts. Share your comments in the live chat that we're going to have right now. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you find today's discussion valuable, please like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who will follow our channel. Now, let us look at some of the facts, okay, about Miss Maduro. Not Miss Maduro, but Miss Maria Corina Machado, right? Now, the Telegraph is reporting here that Machado's return from exile thwarted by White House. So she wanted to go back to Venezuela, but somehow it seems like Trump is preventing her from going there. My understanding is that the plane was heading to Curacao, and after Curacao, she would have, probably jumped in a boat to Venezuela. Another understanding, another, fact that they have reported is that her passport is outdated, right? So it seems like she was really rushing back to her home country. Not sure why at the last minute that Trump decided that he would have stopped her, transportation from Curacao back to Venezuela. Now, Venezuelan opposition leaders' flight out of U.S. reportedly turned around after Washington withdrew support for her plan. The Trump administration reportedly thwarted Maria Corina Machado's attempt to return to Venezuela from exile. The opposition leader, who fled the country last year, chartered a flight to the Caribbean last week, but U.S. officials are said to have ordered her plane to turn around. The U.S. is alleged to have withdrawn permission for the plane to land after Washington signaled that it did not support Ms. Machado's return. She has made it clear she seeks to come home and has renewed her efforts following the devastating twin earthquakes that hit last week, killing more than 2,500, leaving thousands more missing. On June 26, the Nobel Peace Prize winner took off from Virginia en route to the Caribbean island of Curacao. People familiar with the matter told the Wall Street Journal. However, the pilots were abruptly ordered to turn around an hour and take off and told to return to the Washington area, according to the newspaper. Ms. Machado, who has been living in the United States on an expired Venezuelan passport, was said to have been shocked by the change of plans. She had reportedly believed that the White House had approved her journey. Now, this is something that is interesting. Why would they send her? She is on her way home, right, to Venezuela. Now, Trump had supported her before Maduro was dethroned, before he was kidnapped. Now that she's going back home, because according to them, the United States wants to develop and to transition the country into a democratically run one. They accuse Maduro of being autocratic. Now she's going back thinking that she's going to be the new president, or at least if they have elections. My understanding is that they're planning for elections. However, Trump seems to have another opposition in place to fill the seat of María Corina Machado, which is something very interesting, that these presidents and politicians can be so treasonous that they sometimes smile with you and they pretend as if they're supporting you, and then they will turn their backs on you at the opportune moment. Now, Trump administration blocks Venezuelan opposition leaders' return. U.S. cites political stability concerns amid earthquake recovery efforts. So they're saying that she's going to cause more instability if she goes back. But this is the same lady a year ago, they were purporting to be that she would have been the future, leader of Venezuela and to usher Venezuela into a new era, as it were. The Donald Trump U.S. administration has reportedly effectively blocked the return of Venezuelan opposition leader María Corina Machado. The Trump administration reportedly judged that Machado's return could exacerbate political chaos amid growing instability following a major earthquake, potentially disrupting U.S. policy toward Venezuela. The Wall Street Journal, that's the WSJ, reported on July 2nd, citing multiple sources that Machado's return plans were thwarted due to U.S. government opposition. According to the report, Machado's chartered plane, which departed from Virginia, U.S., turned back last week while en route to Curacao, a Caribbean island out near Venezuela. The U.S. government reportedly understood that Machado planned to enter Venezuela by boat via Curacao, and it was learned that Dutch authorities revoked landing permission for her chartered plane. Now, why would they do that at the last minute? Why would they block her from going back to her own country? What do you guys believe? Do you think they blocked her because they found somebody different, or good afternoon, or is that they want somebody else to replace her? It's rather weird that Trump is behaving in this way. And it shows you that Trump is a transactional president, and the military-industrial complex, U.S. foreign policy, is really transactional. And the boss here is suggesting Trump asked Delcy Rodriguez not to touch Machado, yet the opposition leader's return to Venezuela was thwarted, right? So they're telling her that she should not go back, while they're also telling Delcy Rodriguez not to touch her. María Corina Machado, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, had been given the green light to return to Venezuela after several months in exile before her trip was cut short mid-flight, according to a new exclusive report by the Wall Street Journal. Now, if you have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize, now wouldn't that mean that you're contributing something to the country, or you have something to contribute? What instability would she be creating? Now, that is what we need to ask, because they gave her a Nobel Peace Prize, and yet still what they're saying now that no, she's not capable, or she's going to cause some instability in the country. So why would they have given her a Nobel Peace Prize? And what does that Nobel Peace Prize mean, by the way? Right? These are some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves. So I found that very interesting that they would have blocked her from entering her own country, knowing that one, her visa has expired, that's number one, and that she was the one that they had chosen initially, that's last year, up to last year, to succeed Maduro. However, Trump instead, he placed Delcy Rodriguez in the position, and now he has another choice for another opposition, and she feels that she has been betrayed. Now, that is something that is worth, studying, right, and reading. Now, what do you think? Why do you think Trump would have selected her, not her, rather, Delcy, and another opposition instead of Maria? Now, the BBC had reported something here some times ago about why Trump selected Delcy Rodriguez. Let me see if I could get this off the screen. Yes, and they were saying that the same thing that this newspaper is suggesting, that she would have created lots of chaos in Venezuela. Why Maria Machado was not selected. And that was coming from the BBC newspaper. Let me see if I can put it back up here on the screen, why she was not selected. Now, this is coming from the BBC, and they're giving some reasons here why she was not selected. Now, it says here that amid the many questions swirling since last weekend's dramatic events in Caracas, and there are many, one that refuses to go back centers on the bespectacled woman now leading what U.S. officials are calling Venezuela's interim authorities. Why Delcy? What is it about Delcy Rodriguez, daughter of former Marxist guerrilla and deputy to ousted dictator Nicolas Maduro, that has caught the eye of the Trump administration? And why has Washington decided on an avowed Chavista revolutionary to stay in power rather than backing the opposition leader, María Corina Machado, whose opposition movement is widely believed to have won the 2024 presidential elections? And the answer, according to one former U.S. ambassador to Venezuela, is simple. They've gone for stability over democracy. They've gone for stability over democracy. So it's not about democracy. One, it could be authoritarianism once there is some stability, says Charles Shapiro, who serves as George W. Bush's ambassador in Caracas from 2002 to 2004. They've kept the dictatorial regime in place without the dictator. That is what they're saying. The henchmen are still there. I think it's risky as hell. But the alternative, involving wholesale regime change and backing Machado's opposition movement, would have involved other dangers, including potential infighting among opposition figures and the alienation of those Venezuelans, perhaps as many as 30% who voted for Maduro. So she is not a popular person as what they are reporting here. In his dramatic news conference on Saturday morning, U.S. President Donald Trump shocked many observers by dismissing the Nobel Peace Prize winner Machado as not respected inside Venezuela, while describing Rodriguez as gracious. I was very surprised to hear the disqualification of María Corina Machado by President Trump. Kevin Whitaker, former deputy chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in Caracas, says her movement was massively elected, and so disqualifying Machado, in effect, disqualified that whole movement. So it means, therefore, that Trump is not about democracy. He's not about the will of the people. What he really wants is to have U.S. way. And this is something that we have to watch. So when they're telling us about democracy, and democracy is this and democracy is that, then we can understand that that is not so. Yes, Marie's saying good afternoon. Delcy Rodriguez is not exactly like her father, right? And that is so. Many people think that Delcy Rodriguez is this Marxist, right, revolutionary like her father, this sort of guerrilla warfare, but she's not, right? Absolutely, she's not. And I think that she perhaps is living in that sort of shadows, people are thinking that she's revolutionary and she is pro the Bolivarian revolution, when she is absolutely not at all. Then we have here Venezuela's stability is an important consideration as well. Yes, but the fact of the matter is that, they're telling us, or they fooled her, that she was the right pick. And that, the people who had elected her or elected her as opposition leader, well, she wasn't really elected, she was chosen, right? Because the people really, I don't think she's a popular person in Venezuela, but the United States had revved her up, right? And given her this illusion that she was going to be, after Maduro's capture, that they would have put her into the position. And she's finding now that Trump does not even want her to live there. Right, because remember, she was also in hiding. She was exiled in her own country. Nobody knew where she was, right? And she had to be lifted out of the country secretly to have gone to pick up her Nobel Peace Prize. So when we look at what is happening and the entire scenario, we see that something is really very, very bad. Now, will he do the same thing to Delcy Rodriguez? Will she be betrayed also? Because right now they have another opposition leader in Venezuela, and that is why they are blocking María Corina Machado from entering and also being an opposition leader. So I think that something here is amiss, and is something that we also need to watch. Now, there was something in that vein that caught my attention. I was not able to verify anything from the newspaper, but this was unredacted. Redacted was saying they have a video here called "Ukrainians Just Tried to Kill Zelensky in coup assassination attempt." So here we have also another leader that is backed by the United States, and we're seeing here that his own people. I'm going to share the video with you and have you listen to some segments, and we will return and discuss the content thereof. So let me see if I can share that video with you at the moment, and then we shall discuss it. Let me put it on the screen and turn up the volume. So we're going to share this other and turn up the volume.
Yes, capturing Odessa basically would basically turn Ukraine into a landlocked country, therefore not really a country.
Правда, в складывающейся ситуации мы не исключаем и возможности попыток со стороны ВСУ, неожиданных, как считает противник, неожиданных для нас, отвлекающих атак с ограниченными задачами силами спецподразделений. И включение нашего внимания и наших сил от решения главных задач – окончательного освобождения Донбасса и Новороссии.
So that's perhaps a big headline. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, said in an interview with TCN that Putin has basically tasked the Russian General Staff with now calculating various options to end this war and for a massive military operation to capture the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. Listen.
Мы знаємо, що Путін поставив задачу російському генеральному штабу прорахувати різні варіанти ведення наступальної операції, в тому числі і з території Білорусі, з метою захоплення Києва, з метою захоплення інших територій, і російський генштаб розраховував декілька варіантів дій.
So several options for action coming from Belarus, different directions. We don't know. That's not going to be telegraphed and broadcast on CNN, that's for sure. Is this all happening right now? Colonel Douglas McGregor joins us now, one of the keenest insights and analysts on everything that's happening with Ukraine, and we're going to touch on what's going on with Iran. Colonel, great to see you. Welcome back to the show. Oh, I think you're muted. Or is that on our side?
Is that better?
There we go. Good to see you, General.
I'm always happy to be with you.
Thank you so much, Colonel. And I called you General. Colonel, when we look at these latest sort of declarations from the Ukrainian side, seem to be saying, okay, Russia is moving on Odessa. They're going to be moving into Kiev, basically showing their nervousness. What do you make of this, and I know that there are many, as you've talked about, many people inside of Russia, and including part of the military staff that want this to happen. How likely is it to happen, and what sort of timeline are we talking about?
Well, I think we should pause and try to understand what's happening behind the scenes. It may not be expressed publicly, but needs to be understood. And I think the Ukrainian general, I think you said that was Sersky.
Yeah.
He is a nice sort of pictorial display of the state of Ukraine. Have you ever seen a man more entropic, more downcast, more exhausted than this particular general? He's reflecting the truth. When he starts talking about the various options under consideration by the Russians, he knows he has nothing that he can match them with. So he's obviously depressed. There's not much he can do if the Russians decide to act decisively. Now that brings us to the next point. For a long time now, there's been enormous discontent inside Russia with these attacks that for the most part have been pinpricks. But lately you've had unmanned systems crash into refineries. One crashed into a missile production facility. I think a lot of people have said, wait a minute, this is outrageous nonsense. This needs to stop. Thirdly, I can tell you from my sources that there are a lot of senior military leaders in Russia who are very unhappy at the failure to have launched decisive offensives to this point. They think it's long overdue and they need to get started. Then finally, and I haven't seen this in the Western press, but I'm told by my reliable sources that there was just an attempt to kill Zelensky, and a plot was discovered by the SBU, that's the Ukrainian secret police, with the help, I assume, of MI6, which is heavily represented in the headquarters, to kill. So now let's get back to your question.
I'm sorry, before you move on, who would have been responsible for that attempt? Someone within the Ukrainian government, or is it an Alexei Navalny situation?
No.
Okay.
No, 7 Ukrainian officers and government officials. I'm told that at least one of them is a Ukrainian intelligence officer.
That's not surprising, but that's shocking.
No, I think it's very important. And I think it reflects once again what you saw on the face of that Ukrainian general, despair. I think for a long time, there are a lot of people who have privately tried to tell Zelensky, or at least impart to him the truth that, look, this needs to end because the country itself is in ruins. Now, what about these other grandiose ideas of offensives and so forth? From the very beginning, I thought it was very clear that from the Russian standpoint, everything from Kharkov down to Odessa is Russian, and those cities would be Russian again. So I don't think there's any real surprise about that. What's surprising is that now President Putin is making it clear that they're going to do something. President Putin is, if nothing else, he's very methodical. He's very deliberate. He tries to move cautiously. He's been very, very protective of Russian life. If you go back through Russian history and look at the conduct of offensive operations, my God, they spent human lives on a scale we can't imagine, both under the Tsars and then subsequently, the worst of all, of course, under Stalin. I think he is very, very reluctant to do that, but I think he recognizes that he can no longer sit still. He can no longer hold on. I think he's hoped that he was going to get some sort of negotiation, some sort of negotiated agreement. I think he came back from Alaska with a very false impression that the meeting there had meant something. I think it's pretty clear at this point. Alaska was much ado about nothing. It was a reality TV event staged by the director himself, President Trump. Otherwise, there was nothing to it. And that's disappointing because the Russians took it seriously. Not just President Putin, but people in Russia. And even now, people in Russia tend to like us and President Trump and assume that all the problems they've got are with Europeans. And they were really good guys. Well, when $90 billion is on the table for Mr. Zelensky from President Trump. If President Trump turns that money over to him, which I very seriously hope he will not do, that should probably sober them up. And I think they're getting rather tired of that.
Okay, so it's interesting to note that all of this is transactional, right? And they will not stop at length. They will even kill you, right? So we're seeing a sort of treasonous behavior by this, particularly by this Trump behavior. It's typical of the American, administrations of their foreign policy. But, we have never seen a president here that makes it so obvious, right? So palpable, it's in your face, that all they want is for you to do whatever they want you to do. And if after that's finished, then they're moving on to the next person. And if you don't want to move out of the way, they might have to get rid of you. And it seems to me that Zelensky, his life could be in danger right now. So we're looking, for those of you who are just joining, we're looking at María Corina Machado. We're also looking at the likes of Zelensky. And these are two pro-US leaders who have said that they're defending US regime and they are about democracy in their country. At the same time, what we're seeing is authoritarianism. The United States is using them, and when it has used them enough, then it spits them out of her mouth. That is exactly what is happening, and there's no other way to describe it. So if this is the case, and this is how foreign policy is being run from now on, how safe are our countries? How safe are we from this criminal behavior? Because this is criminal. This is criminal. What you see happened to Maria, not because I'm compassionate, I don't believe that she was the most effective, or she is still the most effective leader for Venezuela, but it's just a principle behind how the thing is done, right? That they are willing now to even block her from going back to her own country, which means, therefore, that Trump does not want her to have any hand in politics. Because who runs the politics in Venezuela? Who is running it currently? The United States of America. And that's exactly what they're doing. Now, what is your impression? What are your, how are you thinking? Why do you think they're doing this? Why do you think that they're doing this? Any comment? Now, there was also another video in which, what's her name, Redacted, also with Clayton and his wife, where they were actually talking about the fact that we could be encountering now, or very soon, we will be experiencing shortage in energy, in oil. I think right there in Russia, they're experiencing shortage in energy. Okay, so I think the guest here is going to explain to us what really is going on in terms of energy shortage, and that could be affecting even us, those of us in the Western Hemisphere. All right, so I'm going to pull that up before we end the discussion. All right, so let's go there, and we are going to look at that, and then we will continue with our discussion. Let me turn up the volume.
Essentially back to it was while it was still being filled to begin with. He calculates that we American people to make it through October, except the military has first dibs with military requirements. So if they get the oil first, we could run out by July, he says, this month. Meanwhile, oil prices have fallen. Markets are celebrating. President Trump is demanding that gas stations lower their price. But are we creating the illusion of cheap energy by draining the stockpile? And if we have another shock tomorrow, how much protection do we actually have? Chris Martinson joins us. He just read this 123-page government report, so you don't have to. And he's here to explain why he believes the numbers are far more alarming than the headlines suggest. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Natalie. And Clayton, good to be here. I also am a Virgo, so this will all just fit right in.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say, Chris.
You should just leave.
I already knew. I'm the Capricorn here, so I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. But no, when I saw Chris's tweet about this a short time ago, he's like, I read the 123-page report on the petroleum. I'm like, that's a Virgo. That's got to be a Virgo for sure.
So, okay, break it down for us. You've done a beautiful job of looking at what the government has actually said that we have, how much we have drained. Can you let us know how this works and what the numbers actually say?
Well, sure. So, every nation needs oil, and smart nations keep a strategic stockpile of it. And so we got caught short in 1973, 74 with the Arab oil embargo, and Congress got together and said, let's do something about that. So we started filling holes in the ground with oil, and we call it our strategic petroleum reserve. Now, there's other ways you can do that. Some countries put it in tanks above ground, but we found these salt caverns that were left over from, Morton's salt, taking salt out that, went on our table. And they had these big holes in the ground. So they filled them up with oil. And when they ran out of spaces for that, they started making new salt caverns. And so there are 4 strategic petroleum reserve sites all on the Gulf Coast. And across all 4 of them, there are actually 60 of these little holes in the ground. And they were all topped up right before 2022, when, of course, there was the first big drawdown of the SPR under Biden because of I called it the strategic political reserve at that point. Ostensibly, the reason was they wanted to control oil prices because of the Ukraine-Russia war. But, of course, it was also an election season. So we really tapped into it then. Trump started to fill it back up a little bit, not too much. And then, of course, the Iran war, and now we've just been draining it down again. And as you mentioned, Natalie, the last time we were at this level of storage was 1983, and that was when we were on the upswing. We were filling it at that point in time. We filled it for, 12, 15 years.
And so I did find a picture of what you were talking about, these salt caverns. You say if we actually want to get it out, we have to pump salt water in and then bring it out, but we can't bring all of it out. We have to leave some in or else the cavern collapses. And also the military has first dibs. So that's why we can't rely on what we have in totality, even though what we have in totality right now is still quite low.
Well, it is. So there's a statutory minimum, and there's some rules around all of this. Of course, Washington, everything's got a policy or rule, but the rule says that you have to leave 243 million barrels in there. You can't, that's the floor, go below that, unless the DOD comes in and signs off and says, okay, they have right of first refusal on that. So it's kind of unlikely to me that any clear-headed military person would say, sure, go ahead, just tap that all the way down. We're fine. If something happens with China, don't worry about it. We'll run our tanks on electricity or batteries or something. I don't think they would do that, but they always could. But if we draw that line at 243 million barrels, we've only got another 80 million barrels to go after last week's draw. So that gives us just a few weeks here at this current rate before it's completely gone.
That's crazy. So the idea is then that, well, I mean, I don't want to be cynical, but is it the idea that President Trump can send out these tweets for the 4th of July holiday when everyone's going to notice this at the pump, this idea of this sort of artificial shrinkage on the price, and like, oh man, Trump got it down.
We're fine now.
We're fine. This Iran war, not a bill, nothing to worry about here. But is this all an illusion?
Well, it is an illusion. We're going to get wonky here just for a second. There's the price we see at the pump. And then there's all this intervening stuff in between, refiners, distributors, all this that goes on in between. And right now, a barrel of oil on the open futures market is, I think, about $68, right? It's cheaper than before the war, right? So Trump can crow about that, but we're still seeing kind of high prices at the gas pump. Why is that? And the reason is that when a refiner buys that barrel of oil, they then take it into this very complex piece of machinery, we call it a refinery, and they crack it and they turn it into different products, right? So a barrel of oil can be turned into so many gallons of gasoline and so many gallons of diesel and so many gallons of jet fuel and so on. And so the spread between what they can sell those barrels for and what they had to buy the oil for is called the crack spread, because they're cracking it into different chunks. And that crack spread right now is as high as it's ever been. It's priced as if oil was at $100, $110 a barrel. So how do we make sense of that? Why are refiners gouging us? Well, no. The problem with
what we're seeing is that there could be a shortage because, all of these wars that they're waging, in the Middle East is going to affect us. Let me see if I can end this here. Yeah, is going to affect us. All of these wars that we're seeing in the Middle East will affect us and can create oil shortages. Well, some people are ascertaining that they don't have any oil shortage, but because of the wars, they have to save the energy for wars and not for us to use. I mean, that depends on what you think, but that is what some people are suggesting. Now, our countries, Marie is saying, are not safe because no one who agrees to cooperate with the US is safe, although this seems counterintuitive, but we have Henry Kissinger's famous quote. Absolutely. And that's the whole thing, that when he said, right, that that America does not have any friends, they have only interests, that we have to begin to understand that. Now, Kissinger's famous quote, it may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal. And that is what we're seeing in Zelensky and also in María Corina Machado. That is the former opposition leader of Venezuela, because she's no longer the opposition leader. Neither does Trump want her to be such. Now, it seems to me that the opposition in Venezuela, such as Edmundo Gonzalez, he's saying that she has the right to return, right? He says, hay principios que no admiten negociación. And he's saying that there are principles that do not need any negotiation, right? He's saying that she has the right to enter Venezuela and to live there permanently and to return at her own will. That's what Edmundo Gonzalez, and he was the former opposition leader right there in Venezuela. Now, there is some friction for those of you who are just coming and joining the live. There's some friction between Donald Trump and María Corina Machado. Friction between the both of them, that's Donald Trump administration and María Corina Machado, is becoming increasingly apparent. The Venezuelan opposition leader is intent on returning to her country, especially now after the earthquakes that have left nearly 2,300 dead and 11,000 injured. The U.S. government has aligned itself with acting President Delcy Rodriguez and insists that it is not the time. So he's telling her that it's not the time for her to return to her own country. Now, who could tell you to stop from going to your own country? Attempts by the Nobel laureate to return now are counterproductive, he's saying, a State Department spokesperson told the newspaper here. Now, the opposition, meanwhile, insists that Machado must be allowed to enter her country. In a social media post, Edmundo Gonzalez, the opposition movement's presidential candidate in the July 2024 election, argued that there are principles that are not open to negotiation. That's what he's saying. And I believe that if you have your country, nobody should stop you from going back to your country. And he says here, every Venezuelan's right to enter, remain in, and return to their own country does not depend on authorization from those in power, he said, in an apparent reference to the ban that Machado says Caracas has imposed on her return. Machado, he added, has the right to enter Venezuela. Now, let me ask you, chat, if the government can prevent and disallow somebody, prohibits a member of a party, the likes of María Corina Machado, what can they do to ordinary citizens? Here you have a leader, right, who was the opposition leader of Venezuela, whether we like her or not, whether you like her or not, or whether I like her or not, she was. Now, the fact is, Trump is telling her that she's not allowed in her own country and redirected the flight that she was on to Curacao back to Washington, D.C. Now, what if that were to happen to you or to me? And it can if they're doing that to a former leader. And Z saying, but she gave Trump her Peace Prize. Yes, but did she give it to him, or was that just a symbolic gesture? Did she give the prize to him to have it permanently, or was it a sort of gesture to, sort of make him believe, to make believe? Because it would be stupid to give it to him because it's in her name, right? And then the people there, the committee, the people, the Nobel Prize people there had told her that that was not ethical, and nobody in history had ever given their Nobel Peace Prize to another person, right? Because I'm sure it's written in her name, whatever plaque that they might have given to her. So that was strange, and I just wonder if that was just done for the cameras and it was not real. We'll never know, right? But yes, she did promise that she would have given it to him, and she went to Washington, D.C., where we saw on camera her actually giving it to him. How practical, how feasible that was, I don't know. I don't think that it was something that was real. I think it was staged, right? But she was trying as much as possible to sort of maneuver him and to stroke his ego, right? So that he would be able to send her back to Venezuela as the opposition leader. Because it seems to me, based on what we're seeing, unless it's theater we're watching, it seems to me that she was of the impression that after Trump went into Venezuela and took out the president, that she would have been automatically been the leader, right? But it was not so. Trump instead placed Delcy Rodriguez as the interim president, which she still remains, right? Z saying, I'm being sarcastic. She got in bed with the devil. Absolutely. That's what she did. And this is what we're seeing now, Z, that our prime ministers here in the Caribbean and leaders around the world, we're seeing what is happening to Zelensky. Yesterday on Redacted, for those of you who are just joining, we were watching a video done by Redacted, Clayton Morris and Natalie, and in which they were actually unmasking something that is happening there in the Ukraine, where they're saying Zelensky's life is right now up for grabs, that there could be a coup against him by his own people. Because, right now the Ukraine is devastated. There's no life in the Ukraine, and the people are upset, and it could be some of his own people, and they are willing now to get rid of him, right? And so these are the things that the United States brings you into war, and then it devastates your country. It also fractures relationships within your own country, with your own political, tribes and whatever you have there in your country. And then the United States afterwards decides that they don't want you, spits you out of their mouth, and sometimes does not even allow you to go back to your country. But what is interesting, as we're saying, we're studying third countries, as we've been doing this for some time now, where is she going to be exiled? Because I'm sure she doesn't want to stay in the United States. Would Delcy Rodriguez, is she prepared to remain in the United States, or she will have to be exiled just like Nicolas Maduro? Remember now that the Trump administration had also given Maduro the choice of being exiled in another country. I think it was Russia or one of those Middle Eastern countries, right? But he refused, and that is why they went and they took him out. Now, I'm wondering if they are going to apply the same pressure on Maria Corina Machado to be exiled in another country other than the U.S., or perhaps the U.S. is one of those countries that she could be exiled in. But I'm sure that she is not happy, cannot be happy that she was on her way home and was redirected and rediverted back to Washington, D.C. She must be unhappy. And to know that there is also another opposition leader that has been selected, and she is not the woman, right? She is not the woman, the one who worked hard on behalf of Trump and the empire to oust Nicolas Maduro. This is how politics is actually run in today's world in the 21st century. Please also share the live. The algorithm, as we're saying, is behaving even worse and worse every day. So make sure you're sharing the live. Don't know what the problem is. Share the live with as many people as you possibly can. But this is something that we have to watch. Now, Machado had attempted to return to Venezuela the previous weekend. Her plan was to travel first through the island of Curacao, essentially retracing the route she took in reverse when she left Venezuela last November on her way to Oslo to receive her Nobel Peace Prize. But the private plane she was traveling on was ordered to turn back while still in U.S. airspace. So she wasn't even on Curaçao's land yet, soil, before she was, redirected. Now, back to Washington. Now, Dutch authorities, that's from Curaçao, who handle Curaçao's foreign affairs, initially believed the U.S. backed her trip, but withdrew permission for the plane to land. So this is now even more information that the United States backed her trip and told her she could go back. And then when she was now midway moving towards Curaçao, okay, they told her that she can't, or she could not have gone back. After Washington made clear it did not back it. The Wall Street Journal reported, citing people familiar with the matter, after that failed attempt, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio relayed the Trump administration's view to Machado that while they would not prevent her return, it was not the moment to try, since all attention and resources needed to be dedicated to rescue efforts. Now, what does that have to do? What does her return have to do with rescue efforts? Can you say? What do you think her return to Venezuela have to do with rescue efforts of the United States? Are these connected? Are the rescue efforts and her return connected? Maybe, maybe not. Would she disrupt what is happening there? Maybe, maybe not. The Trump administration is focused exclusively on continuing our efforts to respond to the devastating earthquakes in Venezuela, a State Department spokesperson said Thursday about Machado's attempts to return. Adding sensitive political issues to this situation at this time is counterproductive to our relief efforts following this tragedy. So they are using now the earthquake as a way, as another political stunt to suggest that she cannot return to her native Venezuela. Okay, something that is very interesting to as we navigate this very difficult geopolitical landscape, as it were. Right? Okay, so that's what I thought I would share with you. Maybe we don't need to be here long enough. There are a few of you on here, and I'm sure that perhaps you are very busy too. Today's Friday, so it might not be a day when you. So make sure that you like the live and share it with others, that it can reach to the people who need to hear it. Any questions? Any comments? I wonder if anybody wants to join the chat. Do you want to chat? I mean, I can share the link with you again if you so desire. Anybody wants to chat? I could bring you on if you so desire. And I want to try to see if I can get some of you to speak. Yeah, sometimes you might not want to write a lot, so you want to speak. I'm going to share the link. That's the link there. Let me see what Z is saying here. All about control. Neo-imperialism, she played into their hands. Nothing has really changed for Machado. Absolutely, that's what she did. She played into their hands. So I'm sure that Miss Kamla, Person Bissessor, and all of them, Andrew Holness of Jamaica, and all of them, Dr. Irfan Ali, I'm sure they're watching. And they're realizing that very soon too, if they don't play the game according to how Washington want the game to be played, then they too can be asked to leave power and to even not be permitted to enter their own country, the country of their birth, right? So this is something we have to watch because it is dangerous, right? It is dangerous. And to know that the United States also permitted her to go back to return, they gave her the green light. And then afterwards, they turned and said, no, you can't go. It's almost like they're dealing with a child, right? You're on your way and then to be returned, okay? And then her passport has expired. Now, can't her passport be changed and updated from the States? I would imagine that, all countries have their embassies there, and she's in Washington, D.C. or Virginia, right? So she's near to Washington, D.C., where you have all these embassies. I'm sure Venezuela has an embassy. I'm not sure if they, under Maduro, they have one. That could be the case too, that maybe they don't have one. I'm sure they do, right? That they do have an embassy in Washington, D.C. Couldn't she update her passport in Washington, D.C.? Why is it that she was in the United States on an expired passport? You know, that's something we have to ask. That's really strange when it can be done vis-a-vis, but perhaps she doesn't have her documents there and everything is in Venezuela, because the fact of the matter is that it was like a sneak trip outside of Venezuela when she left Venezuela for the Nobel Peace Prize, you know, so maybe that was the situation there. All right, I'm not going to disturb my channel anymore, so I think that's it for our live session. I'm not going to stay longer. If you have no other comments, I think we can end it here. All right, thank you so much for joining. Have a great evening. All the best.